And we've got to develop a mindset of always teaching and sharing the message of Islam. Part of what we do here, that is why I don't just come and lecture to you, because I didn't want it to be that format. I'm giving you a PowerPoint. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless Riyadh that he does every week, so that you have something tangible. We have a YouTube video that follows this, so that you have no excuse, no reason why not to share this. You can share the PowerPoint, and then I give you the notes. I send and email you the actual notes in which I'm teaching from. So you have the notes, you have a PowerPoint prepared for the notes, you have a YouTube video that we produce. So I'm trying to make it where you don't have an excuse of why you cannot share this message that we are trying to convey. You have everything. You can click at the button and email all your families, all your friends, and send them this in 2 minutes, so that this message can go out. We have been assigned by Allah to spread the message. Udu ilallah. Allah says, call to the way of Allah. It's a command. Allah didn't say it's an option. All of us, if you have tasted the sweetness of Islam, it is obligated upon you to share it to those who have never heard it. And so that's why we do this.
The age-old question all the time. Allah has, in His wisdom, given us some freedom of will. You see, Allah has different kinds of creation that He creates different things for. So one of the creations of Allah is the angels. And in that creation, Allah didn't give them any freedom of will. They are like automatons, they're like robots. They just follow exactly what Allah did. Then Allah chose to create the next set of creatures, which we call human beings, and He has given them some limited freedom of will. So it is in the wisdom of Allah why He's done. And in that freedom of will, Allah has asked us or looked to see and give us the responsibility to pick between good and bad. He mentions in many, many ayahs, in Surah Ash-Shams, for example, he said, وَنَفْسِ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. That Allah swears by the soul and its perfection, that He has created you with the inclination to do good or bad. And the ones who do good will purify their soul and make it wonderful. The ones who do evil will actually find themselves in a bad situation. So He gives us that limited freedom and asks us to choose. And from that, Allah will pick those who made the right decision. So as to why Allah did this, this is part of the wisdom of Allah, why He created us like this and created heaven and hell and angels.
And so we've got to change our attitude. We've really got to change our attitude. Stop sitting at home and feel sorry for yourself. Now is not the moment to do that. Now is not the moment to sit there and say, ooh, I'm so bummed out, I'm so bored, I'm so this. No. Stop making excuses. Stop complaining. For you, with all the difficulties you may have and complaining about them, look out beyond you at those outside who have it 10 times more difficult than we do. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum was put through some of the most severe tests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They never complained. They never complained and said, oh, why me? Why now? Why us? We've got to change that attitude. We've got to realize that now is not the time for complacency, to relax. Now is not the time for us to just become trivial. This is not a moment where you have the luxury of sitting at home and saying, I am bored. I don't know what to do. I've watched enough videos. I need to find something. The reality is, now is the time to recognize the moment is serious. It's always a tough one because you have relatives who have alcohol at their homes. That's why I didn't, when I spoke about
attending gatherings, I didn't say don't go or it's haram to go. It's a tough one to balance. I would say to that any place you go that you're not comfortable with, you should not go. Don't put yourself in a position where you feel uncomfortable. But if it's relatives and stuff like that, you have an obligation to visit your relatives as well. But you got to go with the intention that somehow I'm giving dawah. I'm going there to try to subtly remind them that these things they should try to work against. But it is a tough one because there's a balance in between being unsociable, but you guys have seen the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the 10 categories of very strict rules about it.
ومن أحسن قولا ممن دعا إلى الله وعمل الصالحات وقال إنني من المسلمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and who is better in speech than the one who goes out and calls to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? There's nobody better. That's us. And say that I am from the Muslims. This is our responsibility. I know we do our individual responsibility pretty well. We really fail at our social responsibilities. And we kind of like hide and don't do it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspire our youth to get up and participate and connect with this wider society. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to teach the values of Islam to our children and let them live them and stand up for them regardless of the consequences. For Allah lahu ma fis samawati wal, Allah will make sure that you're okay. Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. Allah will cover you, He will got your back. When we stand up for what is truth and we stand up for what is right.
No, there's two things. One, praying with your shoes as a rule is not disallowed. But if you're going to a masjid, you have to observe whatever rules they have at that particular time. And the general rule that people have in the masjid, take off your shoes. But when we pray janazah, for example, we don't take off our shoes because we pray it outside. So if the rule of the masjid is that we are asking you to take off your shoe, you can't come in and say, hey, well, the Prophet says shoe is okay, I just gotta walk you in my shoe. We don't do that.
It was used for family. The whole family used to gather in the masjid. Women came with children to pray for the congregational prayer. Abu Qatada said that the Prophet said, I saw the Messenger of Allah leading the people in prayer with Umama bin Abil As on his shoulders. When he bowed, he would put her down, and when he stood up prostrating, he would pick her up again. So you had this little girl would be on his back. And of course, we know even his own grandchildren Hassan and Hussein used to be with him and would jump on his back. And the Prophet also remarked, he said that, when I stand for prayer, sometimes I have the intention to extend it, but then I hear a child crying and I shorten the prayer, for I dislike causing difficulty for the child's mother. This is in Bukhari. So the Prophet ﷺ, if he hear a child crying at the back, he would shorten his prayer in consideration for the mother of that child. So children were made to feel welcome in the masjid. One of the things with my masjid is that you always have this issue in Ramadan, when Ramadan comes around, and all the kids are coming, and then they make all this noise, and a lot of the older folks, they get very upset, and they become sometimes, they make harsh remarks to the parents of children. Why are you bringing your kids here, disrupting us, and spoiling our prayer, and become very harsh towards the children being in the masjid. And they always come to me and says, Imam, you have to do something about this. And I'm knowing all of this stuff. I'm trying to find a balance and trying to comfort them. But while the same thing, I know that children are the delight of the masjid. You can't stop the kids from coming in. You should be very happy. When you see children coming into the masjid, it means your masjid has a future. That these are the young heroes of tomorrow. You begin to segregate them from the masjid, then it's not a good sign. And so even though they may be disruptive, and the Prophet demonstrate himself, allowing them to even jump on his back while he was praying, and didn't say, hey, this is breaking my salah, or talk harshly to them. He let the children play and be and have a good time. And so this is a very important part of how the masjid was utilized then. And so we need to know and appreciate that.
You have a Quran app on your phone. Can you go to the
Oh no,
bathroom?
that don't count as Quran. Having the app on the phone, because that is just the app. The data is actually not on the phone. It's you're accessing the data through the app, which is stored some other server, and so it's not that the actual Quran data is on the phone necessarily. It is the app is a window towards which you're accessing a particular hard drive some other place, a server somewhere else. So that is fine. That isn't considered as having Quran.
Ignorance is what allows racism to thrive. And only Islam and Islam alone can illuminate and help the people to get back. Because the Prophet ﷺ demonstrated in a practical way how Islam can eliminate racism and allow people to live and be and love each other. Looking at what's inside of each other, not what's outside of our skin. To deal with each other based on our humanity and not based on our racial ethnicity or cultural or nationalistic kind of ideas. And so, my brothers and sisters, we've got to get back to that. Don't allow our cultures, no matter how strong they are, if they have in your culture or my culture something that is antithetical to Islam, that is against an Islamic principle, you've got to let go of that one behavior in your culture and says, this one I can't practice because this one conflicts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doesn't mean you give up your culture. But if you find there are particular things within it that is against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Rasul, then you have to say, I can't do this one. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be able to return to what He has given us. The Muslims are the only group that have successfully been able to eliminate a lot of the racial disparity that we see among us and to connect with each other as brothers. And we have got to share that with out there, because what is happening out there is people, and we see what the hatred against us ourselves, the rising Islamophobia, and the way we get treated. We should not return the same. We should begin to educate this country to understand the beauty of Islam and how we are able to stand shoulder to shoulder, a white one here, a black one here, a yellow one here, a green one here, in the salah. There's no reserved places in this masjid.
There are two reasons they gave. One is that Surah Tawbah is a continuation of Surah Anfal, it's the same subject matter. So it's almost as if these two surahs are the same. And the second reason they gave is that Surah Tawbah does so much admonition. It talks about Allah's wrath, that Allah's coming down on you, that if you don't strive, Allah going to remove you and bring people better than you and all kinds of very severe stuff. So Allah did not put Bismillah. In the beginning, He didn't want to emphasize His mercy in that surah. He wanted you to know what His displeasure. So those are the two explanations they give for it.
Okay.
There was a question that was asked about organ donation and organ transplantation. And so what happened, I went back and I looked and I saw that the Fiqh Council of North America, they changed their position last year, August 2020, because I guess there was a lot of COVID deaths. And so they came out with a new fatwa regarding organ donation and transplantation. And so I just want to briefly say what it is. So now they have indicated from this fatwa that we are allowed to donate organs and transplant organs among Muslims. There are some conditions that they have put forward. Number one, you cannot sell the organs. Number two, whatever organs you donate while alive, it cannot create such harm to the donor as to endanger their lives. Number three, you have to get consent between donor and recipient. Number four, you cannot donate any vital organ while you're alive that will cause you to die. And death, they classify as cardiac dying from cardiac arrest or a stopping of the heart, there's big discussion about whether brain death also means death. So this death they refer to is death where your heart stops beating. And they also mention that there's a very specific condition that we're not allowed to donate reproductive parts, because there's a higher ruling in Sharia about progeny. And so they said we can't donate our sperms, our ova, or uterus. This is prohibited. And lastly, they mentioned that before you die, you can give organs that don't create tremendous harm, like you may give a kidney or part of a pancreas or liver. And after your death, you may donate your cornea or bone or something like that, that is maybe available. So those are some of the things, but generally it's allowed to do donation and transplantation with these conditions. You can go online and see the whole fatwa. I just give you a quick summary in which they give all their references of how they arrived at these conditions. And
part of this attitude is also understanding and emphasizing what is common among us, not what is different. Part of the march of Black Lives Matter is really to let us know that we need to emphasize what is common among us. What is more, and we have so much more in common than our differences. And so we've got to be able to recognize when you see each other, we should not hate each other, and we should not bully each other and victimize each other, but we should see with each other that we have a common bond that we can be able to work with.
We have so much subgroups and so much differences. Almost every language that is spoken in the world is here. And Allah mentioned about languages and colors, because these are the two things which people get racism the most on. When you try to speak a language that's different from you, they look at you like you're stupid because you have an accent or your color is different. Prophet ﷺ took pains on his last Hajj to say a white is not superior to a black. And so as we approach this very incredibly divisive moment in our history of this country, in this month, the country needs the Muslims more than ever before. It needs to hear those principles which I just mentioned, of no hate, of love, of tolerance, of treating people based on the merit of who they are and not looking at their outer skins or their nationality. And we as a Muslim community have got to stop beginning to look at ourselves like this, because we have fallen victim to that as well. You'll have Indians, but there's not Indians and Indians, because within Indians there's Punjabi, there's, you have Arabs, but then you have, different subgroups. And so within the Muslim community, we also have begun to see ourselves as being from there, and nationalism, and this, and race, and all kinds of things. We even construct our masjids, and we refer to them Pakistani masjid, Indian masjid, Guyanese masjid. And we use these terms of asabiyah, not in an endearing way. Because when we say that, we have a slight feeling, I'm Pakistani, or I'm Guyanese, and there's a tinge in your heart that I think I'm a little better than you. The moment you feel you're better than someone else, you have lost your way. Because racism thrives when people are ignorant.
There are usually three things that people have problems with. Number one is whether you can tell a non-Muslim Merry Christmas. You can wish them Merry Christmas. The scholars from the fiqh councils have indicated to us that they're in agreement that it's okay for you to tell non-Muslim Merry Christmas. You're wishing them a good day for that particular day. Right? Doesn't mean that you believe in Christmas. The second thing is that can you attend parties, Christmas party? The scholars have said yes, as long as they don't have alcohol or you're not partaking in alcoholic beverages and so on. But if they have sometimes they have these parties at work, in which sometimes they don't have alcohol there at all. The third thing is it's in terms of gift exchange. Like I was telling my daughter, because she said what she does,
the school teacher and different people, she will give them a gift at Eid instead of Christmas. And I said, no, we are a religion about giving gifts. You know, the Prophet mentioned even, Ya nisa muslimat la tahkiranna jaratun li jaratiha walau fi shadat. The Muslim women should not stop giving gifts to people, even though it's the worst part of the shank, you know. So if you give a non-Muslim a gift at this time, but I also say you also need to give them one at Eid as well, you know. So the main thing about it is really making sure your belief is you're not imitating the kuffar, you know, in the sense of celebrating with them the celebration, you know. But in terms of relations and being cordial, you know, to things like this, it's important that we don't become antisocial, you know, because you'll end up in a problem with everybody in the school is giving gifts to the teachers, and then the Muslim kid doesn't give a gift to the teacher. The teacher said, what kind of stingy people these are? They begin to, you know, create psychological problems for the kids. So, of course, have some very strict scholars who feel it otherwise, but you know, the fiqh councils have ruled on this and, you know, and allowed certain debates.
Where people can see you. The second one is in terms of the Qibla. We are encouraged to sleep in a way that we are facing the Qibla when we turn on our right side. The minimum is at least don't put your foot to the Kaaba, but you will have a situation where your bed is either going to be north-south or going to be east-west. So if it's north-south, then if you have a way of sleeping with your head on the south, then that would be most desirable. If not, that's fine. Or if it is east-west, avoid having your head at least on the west, so that your feet is facing the Kaaba. We try to always avoid putting our feet towards the Kaaba. It's a general respect. Even in the masjid, when you sit down, you don't straighten out your foot towards the Kaaba. And one of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned Abu Hurairah here, a man said, who is most deserving of my good company? And he says, your mom. And then the man said, and who? He says, your mom. Then he says, who? He says, your mom, and then your father. A lot of time when we read the hadith, we come away with it that mom get gold medal, mom get silver medal, mom get bronze medal, and dad gets none, because you don't got any other medal after the three. And that we come away with it that you have to pay attention to your mother 3 times as much as your father. But what is important here to understand is the companionship. Who is more deserving of my good company that we miss? In other words, your parents don't need your money and need your phone call. They need your physical presence. You're spending time with them. Go visit them. Spend a moment with them. Chat with them. Keep good company with them. And that is the one that is difficult to do. A lot of times we can do all the other stuff, but we don't have time to go sit and just bask in the glow of their presence and the wisdom of their companionship, and that they will remind us that we are heading down that road as well. So the companionship is really critical, and this is what sometimes we miss in this hadith. And of course, the other points are also valid, that your mom, you know, is so special, you know, that you have to treat her well.
We have so many hadith dealing with parents that time does not permit for us to go into all of them. But we are asked, when it comes to your parents, be very careful how we relate with our parents. You do not let your parents cry as a result of something that you are doing against the deen. And the greatest conflict with you and your parents will come usually in one of 3 areas. One, if you start to not practice the religion properly, you're going to get conflict with your parents. 2, when you're going to choose a career, you and your parents are going to fight. And 3, when you get married, you and your parents are going to fight, because there's never agreement on who's the right person to marry you. And so the 3 greatest conflict you will have, the 3 greatest fight you're going to have with your parents are these 3. In picking your career, picking your religion, and picking your spouse. And in those fights, you must be very careful to find a way to don't make your parents sad and to don't make your parents, feel that they're sorry to raise you as a child.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned before, that when it comes to these adab and sunnah, they are sunnah. If you do it any other way, you don't necessarily get sin, but you don't get the blessing. So the Prophet mentioned, no one among you should eat with his left hand or drink with it, for shaitan eats with his left hand and drinks with it. So when you eat with your left hand, we are supposed to be cleaning ourselves with our left hand and eating with our right hand. So if you have a situation where you are able to eat with your right hand, you should do so, because then you will get the rewards for that. But if you are unable to do that and you eat with the left hand, because you have a difficulty with eating with the right hand, then that's fine, but you don't get the blessings of doing that. But if you say, I'm going to challenge this, it doesn't make sense whether left hand or right hand don't make the food tastier, then you challenge the ruling, then that is problematic. Then you will get sin for rebelling against the actual ruling. But if you say, I hear the ruling, but I'm unable to do that at this time, it's difficult for me to do, so I'm prefer to do the other. In that case, you don't get the reward, but you don't get sin as well. And the same thing.
But when it comes to death and dying and this hereafter and all of that, there are some principles which we must understand. Number one, we cannot stop our death. It is inevitable. Death is a reality which all of us will experience. Kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. The Quran says every soul shall taste of death. So when something is inevitable and it's going to happen, don't waste your time agonizing over it, worrying about it, sitting and crying with depression. Oh my God, we're going to die one day. Whether you cry or don't cry, whether you get depressed or don't get depressed, whether you're frustrated or, the reality is it's not going to change that all of us will die. So rather than spend your life worrying about the fact that we will die, accept it as a given and focus on living as long as you can and making life be lived to the fullest benefit that we can. That's the first thing I want to say to you. And then secondly, if we're not sure if something is going to happen after we die, because science cannot tell us anything, because science is based on observable data. There's nothing to observe. Nobody comes back after death to tell us what is happening. So science don't have any answer. And the only clue we have is the dependence on these revelations that come from Allah. But let us assume, even for the purpose of argument, that nothing happens after death, that it's all a hoax, that's just a fairy tale. And when we die, that's the end of it all. We still would have lived a decent, wonderful life as a result of that belief that something is going to happen. We will still have lived a life that is wonderful. But if you decided that nothing happens and you live your life careless, and then when you die and you put up with all that we're saying happens, you would be in a very bad place. And so the smart person is the one who says, you know what? I may not even be sure if something happened or not, but I'm going to make the bet that something may happen and I'm going to prepare for that. So I can cover my bases regardless. If nothing happens, I lose nothing. But if something happens, I am ready and I'm prepared. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us. Our religion has given us lots of information and warning about this. Try to live your life every day. We're not asked to do more than we have the capacity to. All of us have to just get up every day, try to do as much good as you can, understand what are the most important acts that Allah requires from us, and do the best you can within your circumstances. Allah is very merciful. Lastly, I want to mention, Allah is so merciful that there are some people who don't ask for forgiveness, and Allah causes them to become sick or put them through great difficulty and hardship as a way of giving himself an excuse to forgive their sins. When you go through hardship and sickness and difficulty, Allah forgives some of your sins as a result of that. And so because you didn't ask for the forgiveness, Allah says, okay, I'm going to still try to find a way to forgive you by allowing some hardship and difficulty and sickness to come to you. And then I will use that as a basis to forgive you some sins. So you can merit that. So even when we don't ask, Allah comes in and gives us an opportunity to be able to have our sins forgiven. May Allah help us and protect us. And that So there's usually two approaches there. Number one, if you have a deeply entrenched cultural norm in people, you have to educate them about it. But the education doesn't happen overnight. So the Imam has to be able to talk about it. So there is no 40-day work in. So some of the Imams adopt approach, we will go to the 40-day work, but at the 40-day work, we're going to tell you that this is really not part of the religion. There are other Imams who will say, no, this doesn't have anything in Islam to do with it, so I'm not going to be part of it. Now, so you can adopt that approach of non-communication. But usually the practice is when you have a deep cultural practice, it takes a while for people to slowly evolve out of it. It doesn't happen overnight. I can give you my own personal life experience with Guyana, because we came at a time when we encountered all of these strange practices, but we grew up with them until we were told by learned brothers that this is not part of the religion, this is part of it, this is not part of it. And now we had our battles in terms of how do we navigate that. So some of the Imams opted to go and then educate the people there. Others said, no, I'm not going. And that's the way to teach them. And to each his own. So when the Imam do go, they would not participate in the sense of doing anything haram. There's a Quranic function, they're reciting Quran, but they'll point out to the people that this is not how you give blessings to the deceased, by holding a Quranic function. So the Imam has to be able to educate the people when they do attend, not just condone it and say this is after. Even so, both scenarios happen in our community. For myself, as an Imam, I get invited to 40-day work. I decided to go, and then I will let the people know that this is not, At the time of getting the invitation, I will let them know. In fact, when the person passes away, we begin to educate the people about all the different things in terms of funeral, in terms of dead work, in terms of 40-day, in terms of feeling that their dead has come back in the house, and all the different beliefs and wrong beliefs we have about this issue. Once we get a call for the deceased, we begin to educate the family. Okay, these are some of the things that you need to be mindful of.
Okay. Yeah.
No, lying down don't unless you are what it actually meant if you lie down and sleep away. Because if you're sitting and you doze off, like a lot of us do that, right? You sit and you doze off, your wudu don't break.
Sometimes in khutbah,
If you're leaning on something and you sleep away. But if you're laying down flat and you sleep away, so there's if you're just sitting, a lot of times you sit down, you sleep away in the salah itself. You're there sitting in a sitting position, and you just pop out in the morning for Fajr. Your mind blank out and you sleep for a moment. It doesn't break your wudu. You continue doing. So I don't know the exact reason why the old people said that, but lying as a rule, lying down doesn't break wudu. It's loss of consciousness.
Shukran.
That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent his prophet, and his prophet is telling us that the recommendation of a people is to get married. Because, and there's another hadith which he mentioned actually, that Ya ma'ashar al-shabab man istata' al-ba'a falyatazawwaj fa innahu aghaddu lil-basar wa ahsanu lil-faraj. That, oh young people, if you are able to, try to get married, because it will help you to lower your gaze and to protect your chastity. Because we are born with like urges, and we are not allowed to fulfill those sexual urges outside of marriage. So when you remain as an individual, you don't have, that's why the Prophet ﷺ used to advise young people to go fast, because fast tends to, when you're fasting, it kind of diminishes the sexual urges that you may have. And so you can't get to fulfill that. Number two, when you have a spouse, you have this partnership. It is a relationship in which one is helping the other to elevate themselves. When you're by yourself, it is very difficult to do that. And so number three is that marriages produces children, and which increases, as the Prophet ﷺ multiplied my ummah by getting married and having kids. So one of the ways in which we are encouraged to have children and to perpetuate the species as well. But it doesn't mean that we look down on someone who may not get married. There are Sahabas who didn't get married. So it's not something that is a crime. And sometimes it may not be for everyone, but it is certainly one of the best ways. And almost every single person who have accomplished great things, Nobel Peace Prize winners and all of that, 99% of them have been married people. They have been people in marriages. So they have done researches and show that you tend to reach very high level of intellectual accomplishments and all that when you are in a marriage itself.
And you always have enough resources to do something. Look, I said to you, if you examine our community, most of the masjid board members, most of the head of the organizations in our community, CARE, Helping Hand, Islamic Relief, they're not scholars. They're not people who are experts in Islam. They didn't tell themselves, I have to be an alim before I'm on the masjid board, or before I volunteer, or before I accept the position as the head of ICNA, or the head of CARE, or the head of any one of these different groups. No. They didn't do that. You check and see. They didn't sit there and say, I have to have all of this. They said, look, this is what I have. I'm going to step forward with this and champion that position. And Allah will send me whatever it is I need. And all these organizations, masjid boards, they function fairly efficiently. And you will find many board members don't even pray 5 daily salah. Some of them can't recite Surah Fatiha. But what they have is a drive and commitment to take whatever little Allah has blessed them with and say, I want to participate. I want to volunteer. And that's what we have to do.
The sisters have always gotten a bad rap, because what happened is that in most of the Muslim countries, sisters don't, as a rule, go to the masjid regularly. But this is a little bit different in America. In America, especially on Friday prayers, sisters come to Jumu'ah. Even though it's not compulsory, they come. And most of the times what has happened is that because the men pray in the masjid all during the week by themselves, they don't really think sisters. And even the people who are organizing the masjid never really consider that we have to cater for sisters as well. And so they always clear out 2 closets in a corner of the masjid and say, hey, this is your area. So the sisters are always bunched up, always squeezed in the smallest possible area that we can put them, to the great discomfort that they have. And sisters, a lot of them, they don't complain as they should, because they think that this is something that the men know better than them. And sometimes they don't advocate for their own right and privilege. And so the sisters have got to, become more vocal in establishing the things that they would need. In our masjid, we have put a diaper change place there, I think now. But you also need to have like a sitting room area for sisters. I saw the masjid in Orlando in which they had, when the sisters come into their area, there's a nice little sitting room in which those sisters who are not praying, but their husbands may be praying, that they can sit there and chat and gather, and and they have snacks and they're there. It's not the masjid area itself, but it's an area which the sisters can sit and gather, and then they go to the masjid area, which is there. So the sisters should really get an opportunity to see what is happening in the front, either through television monitors. There are many sisters who prefer to see the imam on Friday, and we covered that last week. So we've got the masjid have got to cater for all these different types of things that will make the sisters feel comfortable when they come to the masjid. They should not be made to feel as if they're intruding. And this is what happened a lot of times. You know, sisters come, the brothers, the way they look and treat them is like if they're an intrusion to the male masjid. And they don't see sometimes this. And the first thing that gets sacrificed whenever we have any project or anything that we need to take up the space or we need the space, we go and we pick it from the sister side. That even happened in my masjid as well, you know, in which the sister's space will compromise tremendously. And we've been fighting our way back to get the opportunity to provide a beautiful space for our sisters. Hopefully we are building a new masjid now. The sisters will be upstairs. They will have their own floor, you know, and they will have a beautiful place laid out for them, inshallah, once the project is completed. But we've got to cater for the sisters because they are the ones who bring the children and we need the children. And they're the ones who also need to come and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And don't see that their salvation is based on their husband's piety. They, each brother and each sister, have to strive on their own to earn their Jannah. There's not a rule that your husband is earning your Jannah for you. You have got to strive. That's why Allah said, you know, when Allah mentioned wasabiruna wasabirat, He always mentioned the male and the female, mu'minina wal mu'minat, including the sisters, that you have got to advocate for your place because you also will be held responsible by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment for your own salvation. And so we've got to conceptualize this.
You can see what is happening. People with homophobic tendencies who hate Islam and used to hate Islam in a closet are now showing up at a McDonald's and pouring a hot coffee on a sister. They're acting out on their Islamophobic tendencies in front of our eyes and getting bolder and bolder. And who is being targeted? The Muslims. We have got to respond by bringing our goodness and our values, which we have. There's nobody who's more generous than the Muslim. There's nobody who's more loving of peace, or in the name of a religion is peace. That we can bring this. We see each other, what do we say? Assalamu alaikum. Peace-loving people. We've got to set that message out there. We can't just have it being talked in the masjid and it leaves here. All of the masjid organizations need to say, you know what? We need to get proactive in helping our members attach themselves to the various groups that are seeking to make changes in the land.
The Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us in the dunya hulwa wa khadira, that the life of the world will appear green and sweet. Allah has made it like that. And that Allah makes you generations succeeding one another. That you may try, that He may try you with respect to your actions, how you treat it. In Surah Al-Kahf, Allah says, "Inna ja'alna ma 'ala al-ardi zinatan laha linnabluwahum ayyuhum ahsanu amala." That Allah says, and we have made on the earth, we have made whatever is on the earth as a beautification for you, in order to try you to see whether you will do right by it. In other words, it's a test. Allah has made this earth so beautiful for us, facilitating all of our needs in order to test us to see how we will deal with it. And so from a position of Islam, we have got to understand and approach our stay on the planet in a way that we are facilitating a next generation to come and enjoy it as well. We should not be in the lifestyle of just wasting and grabbing and trying to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. The fourth biggest business in this country is storage. People don't have enough storage for the stuff they gather. Ask every household, you will find, do you think you have a storage problem? Can you do with some more space? Oh, every single one will say yes. They have a house of 5, 6 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, and still they don't have space. The garages are packed to the brim with stuff which you will never use for the rest of your life. We just keep acquiring and we don't get rid of them. We develop an emotional attachment to things, and so we find it difficult to part company with them. You know, we have to paint a little wall, we buy a gallon paint, and we're left with 3/4 gallon when it's done. And then it sits there in the garage until it gets, you know, it has to be given away by the people who will give it away after we pass away. We don't get rid of stuff. And so, as Muslims, we've got to become more conscious of all of this. This is part of the lifestyle of Islam, that we're supposed to live simple, frugal, you know, taking from the dunya, as the Prophet says, kun fi dunya ka annaka ghariba abiru sabil, as if you're passing through, just taking enough to get by. Because your journey is not here, it is going on to another place. We're heading on our way to Jannah. We're not planning to stay here. So don't live as if you're planning to live here forever. You know,
Oh, excuse me, can I get a refill, please?
Coming right up. Excuse me, are you all right?
Yeah. No, it's a long story.
Well, I like stories. I'm considered a bit of a storyteller myself.
My husband, you heard of New York's Noah?
The guy who's building the ark.
That's him.
I love that story. Noah and the ark. You know, a lot of people miss the point of that story. They think it's about God's wrath and anger. They love it when God gets angry.
What is the story about then, the Ark?
Well, I think it's a love story about believing in each other. You know, the animals showed up in pairs. They stood by each other, side by side, just like Noah and his family. Everybody entered the ark side by side.
But my husband says God told him to do it. What do you do with that?
Sounds like an opportunity. Let me ask you something. If someone prays for patience, you think God gives them patience? Or does he give them the opportunity to be patient? If they prayed for courage, does God give them courage, or does he give them opportunity to be courageous? If someone prayed for the family to be closer, do you think God zaps them with warm, fuzzy feelings? Or does he give them opportunities to love each other? Well, I gotta run. A lot of people to serve. Enjoy.
A lot of times it's important to know that one of the beautiful things about the religion is that you may fall short often, and Allah expects that. So sometimes, you know, you commit some big sins, you miss a whole bunch of salah, or you just fall off the wagon, you know, for big chunks at a time, and sometimes it gets you depressed as a believer. You know, we need to remind ourselves that Allah is so merciful. You know, what is important is to just start again and keep slowly, you know, getting back on track. Don't allow your failings to just define you. A failing is an incident. It's just an incident that occurs. It doesn't define you. Failure, you know, that you're a failure, that's a condition. That's different. You know, so a failing does not make you a failure. You know, so if you fall off the wagon, you didn't do things that you're pleased with, or you know better why, you know, don't stress too much. Ask Allah to forgive you and just slowly try to get back onto a place that you'll be happy with. You know, Allah is merciful. Assalamu alaikum.